Hello, everyone. Hello, Ulisik. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm in Italy.
Okay.
Watching you in Beijing or where? Where are you?
Oh,
America.
Beijing.
Oh,
America.
I met you before.
Yes.
Okay, we start?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can start.
Okay. To begin with, let me introduce the Silver Art Foundation. The Silver Art Foundation is a non-profit art organization dedicated to Chinese contemporary art. We promote cross-cultural exchanges between art, science, and philosophy. We have held a series of symposiums, seminar lectures on contemporary art, science, and philosophy, online and offline. A Binani of art and science with Future Forum and the other foundations in China next year. We also plan to build up an art collection for the Silver Art Foundation. Well, Mr. Ulisik, before we get started, on behalf of the founder and the chairman of Silver Art Foundation, I would thank you for your support and being a member of the expert committee of Silver Art Foundation. And thanks for your attending the interview. Now, I hand the interview over to my colleagues, Mr. Gu and Ms. Joy Chen. Thank you. Please, Grace.
Thank you for the introduction.
Yes, thank you for Xie for your introduction. Now it's a turn for Joy Chen. Joy Chen prepare 4 questions for you. So Joy Chen is come from Beijing. Now, Joy Chen, please, your questions.
Hi, Uli.
Hello.
First, I show my respect to what you have done for over more than 30 years for Chinese contemporary art. We have read the article, the interview by ArtNet a few days ago, and to ask more questions other than that. So in that interview, you mentioned you collect a small group of artists and your personal favorite artists now. And can you elaborate on?
I can do that.
Thank you.
Do you have a good signal when I speak?
Yes,
no,
very good.
It's fine.
Good signal. Yeah, okay. So when I said that, I was talking about what I had done until I made my donation by 2012. Before, I collected in a way as a national institution,
Yes.
imagine,
Yes.
would collect. So then I made the donation. Then for me, that chapter, was kind of finalized. Then no need to continue to do that because by now there are so many institutions, so many private collectors who collect and who altogether will be able to, continue to write the history of Chinese contemporary art. So no need for me to keep doing and keep collecting the same way. So what has changed? I changed my focus in the sense that I started then just to collect the artists where I am very interested in what they do. Before, I was trying to mirror the whole art production of China. This was not about my taste. It was about reflecting the art production across all media, along the timeline, whatever at the moment was of importance, I tried to put in that collection. But now it's about my own interest and my own taste, which I had pushed into the background before. So that's really the difference. So I focus on things I personally am very interested in.
Can you give us an example of your interest?
Well, I'm always cautious about mentioning names. I mention someone, then I don't mention someone else. But I think of works that are maybe more etchy and more at the very forefront of art production. So, you know, I cannot say I focus on a certain topic or I avoid another topic. It's more, but maybe we come to that later. You know, art that fulfills certain criteria I like, you know, which is novelty, surprise, complexity, ambiguity. So I focus more on such type work, who are more what the very contemporary art is about.
Like avant-garde, something like that. Very.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Innovations, novelties, the very new thing. Or then, and I think that's your other question, or then about topics I research, I'm interested in. Then I would go to an artist. Yeah, but that's maybe another topic. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
that's the second question.
I made myself clear. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. So my second question is, why do you choose Chinese dream as the assigned art theme? Also, you mentioned in that interview, so I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, because I was facing a similar question like you put to me, which was when I said I commission works. So my current collecting is much about commissioning works. So what do I commission? It's that I personally, I see myself as a researcher about China. My ultimate subject is China. So when I have an issue, say that was, as an example, the Chinese dream, you know, as a policy issue. So I want to research that topic. So of course I must read, I must talk to people. But one method which I find very rewarding is I go to an artist who I think, you know, could have something to say, or at least I could lead that artist to say something about the topic, to see that same topic through the eyes of an artist. So I see it through, like all my method is study things as a person from the economy, as a person who was involved in politics, and the third way through contemporary art. So I will go to an artist and develop with that artist usually this particular topic, Chinese dream. So, you know, it could be many others, like, for instance, I prepared an exhibition about how contemporary artists see calligraphy, you know, the tradition of calligraphy. So I went to an artist, like I went to Fang Mengbo in that case, for instance, and I wanted to know, like, you know, who decides which characters, for instance, are in your smart device? How many are in your smart device? You know, issues Chinese people normally would neither know nor have an interest in. So through the artist together, we research that subject and we find out who will decide what's in your smartphone. It's about almost 7,500 characters. You know, how is the choice made? All this. So I researched the topic. I, with the help of an artist, do that. Or I don't know. Have we talked too much, or you want more examples?
We like to know more.
You have to tell me. Okay. Yeah. So other example could be about the creative process itself, but maybe we talk about that later. So I have a whole number, like, for instance, the social credit system. This is again an issue I study through the different channels, but certainly through an artist's eyes. So I commissioned an artist to do a work with me about social credit score. So this is my way of researching and collecting. Then the work will most likely end up in my collection.
Wow, it's very interesting. Very unusual, right?
Yeah, probably that's not the normal procedure for most people.
Right. So you first studied the artists, then you handpick them and go to them, talk about your project, right?
Yes, because the artist also must have an interest in that particular subject. And
Right.
I have to gain the impression this artist can add something to this topic.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I search for an appropriate artist.
You saw from their old works, is that right? You
yes,
find
from previous works and from the methods they apply. Then I think this could be the artist, have something to say about this subject.
Right, I see. Okay, so as a collector, do you expect Chinese artists to show strong Chinese characteristics in their works to reflect the complex of human and universal value out of their own experience? What do you think? Do you do that?
Well, for me, it's not an either or. It can be all of this. It can be all at the same time. It can be all in a sequence. But for me, that's not material. I'm more looking along, say, two layers. One is the layer of content. One is the layer of form of the artwork. So in content, yes, the artist may use Chinese characteristics, so to speak, maybe Chinese symbols, may refer to the tradition, all okay, or the artist may just want to join, I think that's the second thing you refer to join what I call the global mainstream art, which is what we commonly understand, this worldwide, maybe similar looking type art. Whatever the artist chooses, she has just to excel in whatever method. I don't have a preference for a method. So it's more, what is the artwork about? As I mentioned, is this artwork, does it have novelty? Could be in content. Does it have novelty in form? Does it surprise me? Can this artist take me somewhere I cannot go myself? That is maybe the ultimate criteria for me, how I collect. This could be in a language using or referring Chinese tradition or something totally different. I don't have, a topic I prefer. And I think the artists, of course, have so many different ways to choose subjects to express themselves. So be it content or form. When we talk about content, of course, we very often will end up with death or love or sex or, I don't know, religion. And, we can't expect the artist every day to invent something new in terms of content. As another famous artist said, you can't cut off your ear every day, like Van Gogh did. You can't compose the Fifth of Beethoven every day. You can't expect an artist to do that. But just, an intensity must be in the work. We can't expect new inventions of content. So it could be any subject, but the way the artist treats a subject, this decides, in my view, is this a good or not so good artist, not so meaningful art? Can you present it in a way we have not seen yet? A very old topic, but you present it in a way we haven't seen yet. And then, of course, there is art which just deal with form, like formal questions, like abstract art, things like that. So you can do very interesting art about issues that have nothing to do, maybe even with the real life. There are formal things, like what's a painting? Can we still paint a new painting, or has the last painting already been painted, as some Russian artist said, 1910? So there are issues that purely deal with form, can be very interesting. And then there are issues, of course, may deal with Chinese tradition, which for me is also a very interesting topic. How do the contemporary artists see the Chinese tradition? A work can be about that. Do they want to continue the Chinese tradition as it is? Do they want to take the tradition somewhere else? Are they maybe making fun about their tradition? So all these different behaviors, you can do them very interestingly or very boringly. So the how-to is maybe the most crucial issue about good or say meaningful art or less meaningful art. I'm cautious to talk about good or bad. I prefer to talk about meaningful or not meaningful. So, that maybe covers a little bit. You stop me if I talk too much, please.
Oh, no. We love you to talk too much. I mean, it's really interesting, and you never see kind of question asked before. So I'm really glad you can tell us all about it. And do you expect them to broaden
Very good.
the boundary of art or the boundary of thinking, like ideas? I mean, what do you expect them?
Yes, in fact, I expect them to do everything, but I cannot expect everything from one artist.
Right.
So, if as I said earlier, the artist cannot take me somewhere I haven't been, then, that it may be okay art, but it's not my interest. And of course, I have seen, I'm so old, I have seen hundreds of thousands of artworks by now. So, and, I can think logically, so it takes something more to raise my interest. And also, that means that most likely the artwork I prefer, they push some boundary, content-wise, or in form. They can't do everything, but some maybe open up a new medium, maybe use a very new medium in an interesting way. So, we could talk about that, all the new media, but yes, I mean, if the art doesn't push some boundary, then it's most likely repetitious, and we have seen it before. Maybe you can do it, or they do it much better than before. That's also fine. But, we talk about art which is really significant here, right?
Okay, so can I understand you want the avant-garde in nature of artists techniques, also ideas, also the new media, everything, right? But not
yes, not by the same artist, maybe not in the same work, but every work has to reach some boundary, has to test some limitation,
even
to make it to fascinate me.
And also political and like a sociological content thing.
Yes. If the artwork focus on that, then of course that artwork may also take me in that space, to a boundary. We just don't want to see repetitions. We don't want to be bored. So that's the art I personally am interested in.
Good.
It doesn't mean, it's just a value judgment for me. It doesn't have to be one for you or for who, or, everyone will look at it differently. So this is personal, what I'm saying. Other people may look at it differently.
Okay. And the fourth question is, you have collected and studied Chinese contemporary art for over 30 years. And for the last 10 years, what do you think of the changing status of Chinese contemporary artists globally? What do you think of that for the last 10 years?
Well, you give me a very big task here to judge on that, because there are so many factors in play. Well, I think Chinese contemporary art had better moments, as seen from the world than today. In fact, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was more hot than it is today for a whole number of reasons. It has to do with the market as well. The market always wants flesh. So always in demand of something new. And there was a moment where Chinese art just appeared so new to the market or to the international curators who didn't know Chinese contemporary art before. So that helped, but also the art at that time was quite intense, I think, and was say, working on and describing and dealing with a situation that the world was not familiar with. So Chinese contemporary art was also a way to see the world anew, particularly people who had never ever known about Chinese tradition or Chinese art in the least. So they were very surprised. I know that because I talked to so many people about contemporary art because of this art award. So many famous curators said, wow, we have no idea that the Chinese art production has such a width and such a depth and, deals with every media there is. It's not just, I don't know, ink painting or something. Of course, things we all know, but they didn't. So, that moment has passed. And a few Chinese artists, they could actually, take the moment and ride with this kind of dynamic. But many then, got lost in the international perspective. Were not followed anymore, rightly or wrongly, maybe because they didn't contribute much anymore, or maybe they did more of the same, or it can have many reasons. So I think the interest has a little bit plateaued for art just because it's Chinese art. So now it just has to be very meaningful art. It doesn't have to come across like very Chinese, if it can keep a place in this global mainstream art. When I say global mainstream art, these may be 100 artists, we see almost everywhere. We see them in all the collections. I'm not talking international artists, some Chinese included, in all the biennales, etc. We see them. We see many of them in the auction catalogs, etc. So, in that group, there are not many Chinese artists. Not because they are worse, but they are not known, or they don't have the same marketing power behind them, or the curators may just, now go to Africa. So these are the realities that decide how the world looks at Chinese contemporary art. There's also maybe a kind of backlash now because there is a kind of, how should I call it? This war we now are witnessing between, say, the US and China. So, you are not very popular if you are a big museum. And right now you stage, this big Chinese contemporary art exhibition. So before, there was a real need because the people felt China's going to be very important. So we better understand its art. And I told so many people as well, it's through the contemporary art, a China which you can't read about, or you can read 100 books, but a big exhibition may be more telling. So there was this interest for China because the West has to reckon with China. But now there is a danger, there's a backlash because the mood has changed. Now, all of a sudden, China is the enemy to many cultures in the West, or that's how they feel. So, that doesn't help Chinese art, but it does if a Chinese artist really excels also by, international standards, it's not a handicap either. But maybe for the big exhibitions or for the demand for Chinese art, it becomes a handicap. So I see an issue there. And I see an issue, I don't know whether we should talk about that here, you stop me. It's also the fact that Chinese artists now, well, shall we say, it's like they have to drive a car with a handbrake pulled, because of regulation, censorship, and all that. While their competitors, outside China, they don't have a break. They can do all research. They can just follow their instincts and produce. So if you are constrained in your creativity, overly constrained, of course, it's just so much more difficult to be a good artist and, to have the world notice that you are a good artist. So that's an issue. And also maybe, but I don't want to become too political, but there is a different understanding, I think, still in much of China, not in the people, we know from the contemporary art in China, but outside them and in official China, that looks at art and with a different paradigm. It's still like from the tradition where you feel art is here to help us enjoy ourselves, take us to the sublime, take us to another world from here, show us the ideal, show us the beauty, give us the feeling of harmony. Art is your very good friend, in that type of thinking. That comes from the tradition. But the contemporary art is not your good friend. Contemporary art is not your good friend. Contemporary art tells you, maybe put the finger in the wound, or is critical about the reality, while in the tradition it's more ideal world. The world is rather shown as it ought to be. Of course, I generalize. There are also other examples, but the basic trend. While say. Then came like socialist realism, then came that period where the art becomes, shall we say, your fatherly friend, show you how the world should be, how you should act, what's the ideal, work hero, etc. is. But the contemporary art is not your good friend. So you have to be open, and you have to have an interest in critique of what you're doing. You have to have an interest in, art showing you new space, showing you new thoughts. You have to be much more open than in the old tradition. If you don't have this openness, you will not appreciate the contemporary art. So there is still, because that maybe is also a question of time, how long have you been exposed to this kind of art, because you can only like it if you have been exposed to it. Otherwise, of course, it was same with us 50 years ago, 70 years ago. The people said, what shit are they doing? What is this? I don't understand. So it's a process, and this process needs exposure. It needs discussion about it, good examples, bad examples. When you cut off this discussion, then the people may not really get into it. So that's another issue, maybe kind of weighing on the Chinese contemporary art right now.
And except the political issue, and you talk about, like, let's say, if we say like art form or techniques or contemporary art concept, this wise, what do you think of Chinese contemporary art, the status in the world? Because some also accept the censorship I mean, pure.
Yeah, but
form.
you know, I'm not. Sorry, interrupt. I was not necessarily just talking about censorship. It's more the attitude towards what art should do. You know, should it be just a beautiful space over there, and you know, I go there now and entertain, then I come back, or should it be really, you know, part of the life? So that's not even so much political. So it just, you know, it comes from another origin, or has other purpose, or has other, it's another idea what art is about. But then, of course, you know, you may have to add sometimes censorship. But I did interrupt you. I'm very sorry. So you asked me about, can you say again?
Yeah.
What you're asking?
Like maybe 20 more years ago, Mr. Li Xianting, you know, Chinese critics, famous critic, and he said Chinese contemporary art is like a spring roll on the table of Western dinner. I don't know if you read about that. So that, I mean, is that changing now? I mean, except the political reason, if we talk about only art concept and art or forms. So what do you think of
it? I think changed, because the art production in China, the art creation, is again much broader than it was. You know, when he was curating and presenting exhibitions, the art was very political and almost only political. And of course, it was kind of produced against the system. So, you know, the artists were rubbing against the system. That creates a certain type of art. Now, you know, that situation has very much changed. And of course, Chinese society, you know, is at a very different place from what it was then. And so the artists deal with, you know, where the Chinese society is in now. And these issues, you know, now, it could be urbanism, it can be identity, you know. So there are many, many things. And also ever more like abstract art with its formal questions didn't exist, you know, when Li Xianting curate almost didn't exist. So I think that has changed. And also the Western people, the curators, museums, the ones who are in the know, you know, they don't look for the spring roll type. But the ones who are not in the know, but feel I must do something Chinese, you know, they are still there. They are still there. So, yeah, it hasn't disappeared, but it has become very unimportant, I think. But of course, you always have like the many Western curators, and I see it coming again, you know, with China being the foe of so many people, that, you know, they will pick again the works that deal with human rights, or that deal with Tibet, etc. You know, I can already see them, the one who are not so familiar, they will choose these things, the Western curators, because they think that's what their audience wants to see. So, you know, we may come back to a somewhat similar thing from another corner now. That's a risk.
And as you said, maybe China contemporary art is now, you know, not, you know, at high peak, right? Period. But you're still interested in Chinese contemporary art. Why?
Yes, still very interested, because as I told you earlier, my ultimate subject is still China. So I research it through the contemporary art. And as I said, business, politics, and, you know, one life not enough to come near a clear image or picture. So yes, I will continue to do that. Also, I sit in the middle of it. Well, not now, because now I cannot travel, but normally I come to China 6-8 times a year. So, and most of my friends, they are somehow in the art world, artists, you know, and the like. So for me, it just makes sense to continue. It's not, you know, it wasn't the flavor of the moment for me. It's a kind of lifelong kind of activity. And you know, it's still a huge space, and it's a huge art scene, and it has many, many, many facets. So I don't think it's boring in any way. For me, more boring to look at, say, or if I would only have to focus on European art, then I wouldn't be so happy.
Okay.
Okay. So Joyton, I think it's my turn. Sorry. Yeah, finish the question from Joyton, and now it's my turn. I have 5 or 6 questions for you. And the first question is, in recent years, Chinese curators try to bring contemporary art to countryside. It's so-called land art or field art. We did in Guang'an, the hometown of Deng Xiaoping. We try to install or setting up some sculpture, installation, environment art in the countryside. So this is our cooperation with Xierong also last year, and we have the same purpose. It's social intervention. So what is your opinion to about this developing of contemporary art in China, and how do you think about social intervention power of the contemporary art?
Well, first a question. You know, land art in the Western terminology is art with the soil. You know, it's not you do art projects on the countryside. Land art means you do landscaping. You're not talking about that.
Yes, we call our art, it's like a field art. It's a new word, new conception. It's not only bring art in the nature, also bring art to the agriculture civilization, to the countryside, to the village.
I know. Yeah.
So it's
all I'm saying is land art, you know, is a very specific thing. It's art. It's landscaping art. But that's not what we talk about. Yeah, we talk more like social intervention on the countryside, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think, of course, I mean, the Chinese countryside is pretty big. It's a few 100 million people living there. So, you know, bring art to them is a very good thing. You know, why should they be excluded? Why shouldn't they also not, say, see contemporary art? For all these reasons, you know, I just made this plaidoyer for contemporary art earlier. Why I think, you know, contemporary art has such an important role to play, because it's more than taking you to this beautiful and harmonious realm. And of course, same thing goes for the countryside. They just may have different topics. And the question is, you know, how can we reach them with the right topics that they are also engaged or feel engaged, or that such intervention will have an effect. And then, of course, you have to deal with, you know, how much is this intervention wished by the local people or by the local authorities, as yet another issue to consider. But I think local intervention can have a strong effect. Of course, we shouldn't be too, we shouldn't have too much illusions about what art can do. Maybe art can move the people, you know, who are immediately affected, or who immediately are there, or, you know, who share an intervention or who witness an intervention. But, you know, there may be a million other people in that 4th tier city who, you know, who may just maybe not even take note. So we shouldn't have illusions. But if we only change, you know, a few people to the better, or their lives, or whatever it is, or we make them aware of the issue, and then maybe that's the most important thing, or we start their inner engine to think about something, then it's already worth it. But are we going to change, you know, the world of the countryside people? Maybe not quickly, but maybe with many interventions. But yes, I think it's a good thing, because it's also very good for artists, you know, to see what art does in another space than maybe where it was intended, And, you know, maybe they gain experience for their own practice. Maybe that art will take off into another direction. So yes, I think it's a very good thing, provided you find people willing to do it, and you find the means to do it, or they have the means to do it. But it probably can reach more people than, you know, it may reach people in a very saturated, huge city where the people already have everything and have seen everything, or think they have seen everything. It may have just even more impact.
Yes, okay. So thank you for your answer. My next question also about art intervention. First question is art intervention towards the society, but next time I think also art intervention towards art community itself. So that's why the Civil Art Foundation is a platform dedicated to elevating human wisdom and inspiring creativity. Our vision and aim are bring together a communicative integration of art, science, philosophy, and humanity across disciplines. We established the Science and Art Labs, which somewhat resemble to CKM, Center for Art and Media, Karlsruhe. What is the focus of our Science and Art Lab? This is a kind of application scenarios that combine science and art. In this way, we escape to contribute idea to the growth of artificial intelligence, like virtual reality, electronic art, and the other relevant media art field. So how do you think about such a direction? Do you have any suggestion for us?
Well, of course, I don't know all the topics you already discussed, you know, internally. So to me, this was very new. I just saw a few lines, you know, about what your plans are. So, of course, if I knew better in more detail, I could say maybe something more meaningful. But of course, even if we just look from visual arts, the trend goes to crossover into other disciplines, because sometimes the visual arts exhaust themselves, you know, by just, you know, looking at themselves. So that, of course, is a good idea to begin with. And artists have to find more resources. So, you know, for long, the Chinese artists were very fascinated, say, with Western conceptual art. And for many years, this served as a resource for artists to do works. Then, you know, many artists return to their own roots, to, say, Chinese tradition, and drew a lot of resource from Chinese tradition to do their art. And of course, from crossing over the visual arts, you know, this is a very interesting other resource to exploit, including technology. And so, you know, as a direction, I think it's a very good thing. If I look at Karlsruhe, from time to time I go there, you know, I see their exhibitions. I think they play a useful role, but in the end, what's visible, you know, is yet another art exhibition. So, you know, I don't see them to be so revolutionary as they promise. But I mean, it's also a good thing. But what does that tell us? It tells us it's not so easy to really make a difference, and you know, to have a conception that's not just a beautiful paper, but that leads to somewhere in practice and in the reality. So I saw you had some ideas already in this text, or even tried out, like this art clinic or artist clinic.
Yes.
Yeah, which I think is a quite interesting idea. I don't know whether that's a good name, because, you know, which artist wants to go to a clinic, because it means the artist, you know, has a problem, is sick somewhere. needs help. Only a few probably, would agree to that. So maybe I would name it differently, so more inviting, and so an artist feels, maybe I better go there, but I don't want to be a patient. But that's a detail, right?
Yes,
But the
yeah.
idea, I mean, to be there for artists who are stuck is an interesting idea. And I mean, we all know artists who are stuck somewhere, and it's very difficult to make a step beyond that. And maybe outside help is of course, it's worth a try. So yes, it's a helpful idea. I just don't know, how many people you reach with the clinic, and whether the Chinese artists are proud people. I don't have to tell you all, whether they want to write to me. I need this help. So maybe there are more inviting terms, but it's a good idea, I think. But
yes.
But that's just one facet, I understand, of what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting to bridge to science, because mostly, say, this cross-border thing may go to design and architecture, film, but I don't know anyone who really focus on art and science. And this I find so interesting, because where do the two meet, where do they overlap? It's in the field of creativity. So not the only one, but a major field, because both need creativity to excel, but how you get there. So you mentioned that word also several times, and in the paper. And I think a focus on creativity, to draw the lessons from both fields, that can be very rewarding. And not so much has happened there. Actually, in Switzerland, many years ago, we had a psychiatrist who focused on the creative process. And this was very interesting what he did. And maybe that's something, that could be done in China as well. But we speak like almost 30 years ago. He invited, we were a small group of people, and he would invite like several Nobel Prize winners, or famous mathematician, or composer. And then it was just a group talk, and then they would explain how exactly, they made that big invention, or how exactly they composed that piece. And this was very, very interesting, then you could distill the process, how creativity, say, affects, how it works. And there were these theories he developed then, where you define the issue, and then there's an incubation period, can be short, can be very long, until you all of a sudden come to a solution. And that solution, very interesting, like the Nobel Prize winner who designed the electron, what is it called, some electron microscope, got the Nobel Prize for that. He said like 8 years, he was in an IBM lab in Switzerland, searching for a formula, certain mathematical formula, which he thought that's the solution. And, after years, he got so exhausted, they sent him to a kind of a resort, IBM resort in the US, to relax. He was lying there, exhausted, and all of a sudden, looking at the ceiling, he saw this formula written on the ceiling. Of course, his imagination. And, all these stories, so interesting, how people had this creative moment, and how they thought, this can be helped, maybe by, all kinds of measures. So that was, for instance, something very useful, I thought, how you can induce creativity. And the scientists and the visual artists, I think, are the ones maybe depending most on these two elements. Not so much the craft, not so much the design, also not the very functional disciplines, not so much applied art, but these two, I think, have a very good match, talking about creativity. of course, they have different directions. You know, the science has to help a purpose. Art doesn't have to have a purpose, so the creativity become even more central. But I think the two have a lot to talk about. How to initiate this talk is very difficult, I think. Why is it difficult? Because, say, you know, if you bring artists together, of course they want to keep some things to themselves. They don't want to tell you, this is going to be my next work. And, you know, the other artists may even steal my idea. The scientists, you know, also similar if they are same field. So how to set it up so you can really launch, you know, this dialogue, that's not so easy. But like that example I was now thinking of was a very good example how to do it. So I think it's a very good thing you do, but the difficulty lies in something happening, not have more talk, or maybe have a nice protocol resulting, but how can something happen? So probably needs more thought about that. But you have other questions, maybe we come to that. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, you know, I curated an exhibition last year in China entitled Everything Evolution. It's we bring together the 5 artists and the 5 scientists. They have conversation and deeply conversation between them. And also they visit their studio, each other, even their lab and their studio. And when they talk about their underlying logic thinking, something happened, because many surprise bring from artists, also many surprise bring from artist side to the scientist. So this is currently, so the Civil Art Foundation is preparing the Science and Art Biennale in association with the Future Forum and the Xizun Foundation and the other foundation. Also, it's a great honor to have you as the honorable chairman for our committee. We knew you attending many large-scale international exhibitions every year, such as Venezia Biennale and Documenta and Art Basel, so on. So you are also very familiar with a few biennales held in China before. By the creating the Science and Art Biennale as a new and experimental biennale, we hope that the scientists and artists can collaborate in the underlying logical thinking. We hope that their studio could be open each other, and so they can have a in deep cooperation, in deep collaborations in terms of creative thinking, rather than only a collaboration between production or at a technical level. So is it possible to initiate such a new biennale? Yeah, I talking about new initiation also. How can we promote such a new biennale? So you have so many experience. Can you share your experience to us as an advisor?
Well, that's not such easy question. You know, what's a biennial? A biennial only says something every 2 years. It has no other meaning. So, you know, are we talking about the exhibition? Are we talking about, you know, every 2 year symposium? Are we talking about every 2 year artists and scientists visiting? You know, are we talking about a product? Who is the audience? So, you know, all these things have to be kind of cleared to come up with a round proposal. So you have to tell me a little bit more about your current thinking, so I can be helpful. You know, which of the things I talk about is it?
Yes, this is a biennale. Your biennale, so many biennale in China already, but this biennale more focused in science and art. This cross-discipline efforts. So every book was produced by artists and scientists together. They have this cooperation to produce their work. So we have the proposal for the museum next year in Shanghai and in Beijing, and we already invite some artists to think about that proposal, and also the scientists very exciting. You know, many scientists, interesting artists, and also they try to create some artist work, but they still shortage of the knowledge of the art. So if artists and the scientists, they bring together, they create many good atmosphere to have deeply conversation, and also a depth rethinking. How can I create something? So so this finale just in exhibitions, but we try to bring the new direction for art. It's not only depend on the level of technique. It's depend on the thinking. It's like underlying logic thinking about science, about art, about creativity. Yeah.
Well, my question was rather, you have answered it halfway. You say it's an exhibition.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was my, is it an exhibition? Is it a symposium? Is it a get together? Is the product an exhibition every 2 years? Is the product a protocol, you know, an interesting protocol of great exchange of minds? That's my question. What is the output you want to reach? Maybe you don't know fully yet, maybe you know. So from what you said, I understand you expect a physical result of some type already when you launched the Biennale from some cooperation between scientists and artists, right? So so you have to say launch the process now to be ready in 1 year or something. Huh? And what you launch as a process is that, say, one artist and one scientist or many of each side meet and brainstorm, and then maybe the artist walks away and does a work, or maybe the scientist walks away and does a work, or maybe the two do a work. You know, is that the idea, or parts of it, or just so I see better what your thinking is at this very moment?
Yeah, in this moment.
Did I describe it properly?
Yeah, this is like a production produced by the artists and scientists together. Yeah, maybe their field, but all the work not only come from artists, also not only come from scientists. They have the collaborations, and they have to discussing and produce the work together. So this is a new style and a new thinking for the curating. For me, it's also a challenge. But in last year, some work produced by artists, they really open the mind of the artists. Artists really like to participate this new context and the new situation to produce work. So their way of thinking is changed. Sometimes their vision of thinking was changed by this social.
That's clear.
Yeah.
That's clear to me. I talk about, you must give this thing a structure. Which is, you know, is there a moment where artists and scientists find each other? You create that moment, or how you get, you know, how you get the process started, where they'll produce what I understand is, what do we call an artwork? Do we call it an artwork? What the two produce?
Yes, when they produce some proposal to me, and I work with some curating teams. We also have the conversation between artists and the scientists. So when the artists and scientists have the agreement of a good productions, and maybe we think it's done. Sometimes they only have some. Looks like a corporation, but it's only like a party. It's not good. So sometimes they have some argument. Yeah, the scientists, they think, oh, it's not for their, it's not their job. It's not my vision of art. So this is something difficult. But when artists and scientists really enjoy these creative conversations, they could produce some new work. Sometimes the new work is a jump out of their way of thinking. It's so different from their formal work. But we try to support, you know, we will pay the artist fee and the material fee for some good proposals, and then the artists and the scientists, they can finish, they can produce their work, and then maybe we can show half of the project. Maybe we can show 70% of the project. But this is experimental biennale. So experimental exhibitions. That's we tried, and also we very interesting the procedure of the producing, how they are working, how they are fighting. And we have many documentary video and documentary of process and to show the background of the exhibitions. So we not only like to show the artwork was produced by the artists and the scientists. Also, we can show their dialogue, their conversation by many documentary and as the background. So this is also, I think it's like a science and art lab, but this lab could produce a new way of biennale. And we try to prepare for 1 year and more times, but it's a good challenge for me. It's as a curator, independent curator. Yeah.
No, I see more clearly. Oh, I mean, it's a very interesting idea, but I see the difficulties organizing the process and take some resource. And the result could be anything from a protocol to a finished work of something. And yeah, we may or may not be able to call it an artwork or a scientific experiment or whatever. I understand that. Yeah. So I think, yeah, but need a strong hand to give it the structure. So after 1 year, there is a result to show, whatever the result is. But, you know, you have to kind of define a process, and there has to be a cutoff of the process. And that's very difficult if two disciplines meet. You know, one discipline may think, well, it's done, and the other discipline may think it just starts, you know. And I did some projects in the field of AI, you know, artificial intelligence. And then you get into such similar issues like, even, you know, is an artist involved at all? And do we need an artist with AI and all these things? So I agree with you. It's very interesting, but it's kind of time consuming. And do you have the resources to do that?
Yes, I have some results.
It's a good result. Yeah,
it's some good results, and very helpful for artists also. And you know, we also have the art clinic project. This is an interesting project. Many artists really like it when we bring the critic and the curator and the scientist and the psychologist and cultural scholars to artists as an expert. Artists so happy to listen and conversation with them, and also we are succeed in setting up a few conversation with a few artists already online between expert and those artists. We keep secret for those artists. You know, it's the artists also proud of them, but artists really like this project, and it developed their vision and their way of thinking and rethinking. So this is also, you know, the artists have some trouble. They are also the true artists. The true artists always have to face the trouble and the bottlenecks and just uncertainty. Yeah, some uncertainty in their creations. So when we try to bring this service to artists, the artists think this is a real soul art foundation. And so for example, when the artists want to practice their application scenarios, we bring experts from the artificial intelligence research associations. And this expert for AI is a very advanced expert in China. So artists very enjoy their help from the field. Also we bring some Saman expert to artists. So artists also they have some new knowledgement about what is the Saman culture, what is psychologist culture and experience. So even we only accept 3 or 4 artists from the art clinic project, but the result is good. Also, artists really enjoy the process. They think it's not only about production, but also connecting to creative process. So this is.
Well, I think it has great potential.
Yeah.
I have no doubt.
Yes.
Takes some learning how to structure it.
Yes.
Very good idea.
Thank you. So my next question is, at the present, sharing knowledge through online platform has become a new trend. Since there are more discussion about online and online exhibition or virtual exhibition, such as Soundworks and the virtual artworks and the online interactions. Do you think such a term will bring about changes in art and the art collection in the post-COVID times? I mean, after this pandemic period, something will be changed in art, also in art collections. How do you think about this kind of change?
Well, of course, it's a moving target, you know, this COVID. And yes. Most people now underline a quite black scenario, you know, will COVID go away? Maybe not for a long time. I'm actually surprised how black the scenarios are in the art world. You know, I just had a conference with the Tate on this issue, of course, with M+, you know, similar discussions, and they all think, you know, they have to contend for years with the COVID type problem. And of course, they now dismiss like a third of their people or more. They think a third of all museums will disappear because of COVID, for instance. They think the time of the blockbuster exhibition, you know, may never come back. You know what I mean? Blockbuster exhibition, you know, the big exhibition. Monet draw, you know, 1 million people in 2 months. So, you know, they think it has dramatic effect, at least on the presentation of art on the museums. And it brings out more the value of a collection, because, you know, the money is there to show collection exhibition. The works don't have to travel, because here comes in another issue like the whole climate change, etc., which all of a sudden a lot of people feel, well, first of all, should we travel to exhibitions all over the world? Second, should the works travel all over the world, to be exhibited? Maybe the screen can do this, for instance, to come closer to your question. Personally, I think if there is a vaccine, something, the COVID goes away, people in their general attitudes will very much return to old habits. That doesn't have to be for art and for the art people and for the art market and for collecting, because what we learn now, I think the good things we will keep. So, I mean, all these virtual exhibition rooms, etc., they draw actually a lot of people. People, of course, due to COVID, spend more time looking at art. If we think back, when do people go to galleries, for instance? Of course, Beijing, Shanghai, actually quite fortunate because they have a cluster of galleries. So, people just go there and they can spend a whole day and they can see, if they like, 50 galleries. If you are in London, this is very hard work just to see 5 galleries, because one is there, another one is there. And so, the people actually then have a certain shyness even to enter the gallery. They think, oh, that I have to talk and the people recognize me and all that. So maybe the viewing room is something that will remain. And of course, the media and the art created, is ever more, able to be seen in the viewing room. Videos, photos, two-dimensional works in general. You can see actually reasonably well, particularly high resolution in viewing rooms. What's more difficult? So the three-dimensional stuff, all the installations, etc. There is a problem, not solved. But I think that plus all these webinars, on everything, they will stay. I think. Actually, you have access to a lot more information than before. About art market, etc. There is not a day where I don't receive, say, emails, to join this and that, be it to speak or just to view it. That didn't happen in the past in the same, quantity. So it has really changed. And I think that's an interesting facet, all these webinars about, God knows what. If I have an interest, I can click into a million things. But it also makes it more difficult. There's more competition all of a sudden for our time, because I don't want to spend my day with 5 webinars. Maybe I can do a webinar every second day or something. So, it's new rules, and yes, some of it will stay, I think. Particularly the use of the screen for communication will stay.
Okay, good. So last question, Uli. I don't want you to be too tired.
Really make me work here. Huh?
Okay. Yes. Last question. As I know, you are not only an expert for Chinese contemporary art, but also you are good at Western art, Western contemporary art. So last question comes from Xie Rong. As an art consultant of Art Forum, she was engaged into setting up a new museum. It's a so-called Science and Art Museum for the Art Forum in the future. So in her plan, she tried to also develop a collection. So what is your any suggestion for the collection of a new Chinese art museum? Should they collect more Western art, contemporary art?
Well, first of all, if doing a museum, I would put much effort in doing a museum like no other. That's not so easy to do. But yeah, the world doesn't need just another museum. But I understand the focus is already very interesting, art and science for a museum.
Yes.
You mentioned the KZM. they call it the digital Bauhaus in Germany type of, so something of that type, to my knowledge, doesn't exist in China. So I think it's, to begin with, it's a very interesting thing, but it should be like no other museum, because, if it's just one more visual arts museum, that maybe is not yet it. Then, what to collect, and, I'm just saying that, I mean, it's not so easy. It's not that I have this million good ideas how to do this different museum. So I just put it there because I think it's important, but I may not have all the answers. What to collect? I think I would strongly suggest my method of commissioning, because then you can really target what you want. You can really target something that fits exactly in this museum. You choose the artist, maybe the sign. I mean, you're already doing something along these lines, maybe not yet, with this purpose as I commission, but I think I, for instance, would only collect what I commission, just as one, set of ideas. And I would carefully select what exactly I feel is the core of this and build around this core, art and science. But of course, you also mentioned philosophy, humanities, etc. So, I mean, it's a very broad range. But then you may not have this museum, on day one, but you build a museum which is unique if you would go along this line, I think. So, should it be Chinese? Should it be Western art? Maybe that become less and less relevant. It just should be that particular art, whether it's Chinese artists, whether Western, provided you have the funds to do that. And you may actually notice that the same type of art may cost you substantially less money in the West, or say in Korea, than in China. So, you may even get more art for your money elsewhere. So I would open up my eyes for both. But of course, it's a museum in China. It's a new idea. Why not build this idea around the Chinese art? But, if there is like a very interesting Western piece, or there is an artist fit right in there, then I would also do this. I wouldn't make it conditional, that it's from here or there, but I would build it around Chinese artists. So that would be my, not very well thought out answer, just what comes to my mind. Yeah.
Okay, good. But that's all my questions, Uli. Thank you for your answers, kindly answered. Joy Chen and Xie Rong, do you have more questions? We still have a few minutes.
Can I ask one more?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm interested if you're expecting Chinese contemporary art enter the mainstream in the world. Do you expect of that? Or
yes, I mean, I very much hope Chinese art will enter the mainstream, but that does not imply that I want the artist to do the mainstream work. But yes, I hope. And all my efforts, say with the Art Award and now Prize, is really about that the more Chinese artists will come into this mainstream, because they deserve it. It's not that the other artists are so much better. It's just that these people, who are the gatekeepers to these big institutions and documenters and all this, are Western people. So they bring in what they know. And what they don't know, it may be much better, but it's not going to be there. So yes, I think, there are enough Chinese artists have the potential to be mainstream artists. But it takes a number of things, It takes someone to help you there. It takes someone to see you at the right moment. It takes maybe even a good gallery, who is putting an effort into you and not into someone else. And, it's a lot of things, and they can make, out of a lot of good artists who have the same potential. Some will just, shoot up. They are not better than others, but because of their, luck and all these elements just fit at that moment, they make it and others don't. So I think, there will be ever more Chinese artists, I hope.
And when you say your ultimate goal is Chinese contemporary art, right? Your collection. And when you say that, it means you want Chinese artists to do artwork about China, the change of China or the society or whatever about China, or they can do whatever as long as they're Chinese artists. So
well, what should I say?
I mean, do you expect Chinese artists to go to their roots, to Chinese philosophy, thinking?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
I was trying to say that, in the early question. This is just one method. I just want to see an artist apply, a method very successfully. It can be on the content layer, it can be on the formal layer, it can come from, the Fiji Islands, the idea, it can come from Chinese tradition. It just has to be, a novelty. It has to maybe be eccentric for some ideas, all the qualities we expect in artwork. But I have no such requirement. But I collect the Chinese art, and that's why I ask, I guess, because I'm researching that country and that culture. And this is just a very good way to do that particular research. And as a result, I can collect also some of the results of my research. That's actually what I'm doing. But I also collect other art. Next April, in fact, I will do an exhibition about Korea, about South Korea, North Korea, even some Chinese artists who do artworks about the North Korean situation. The people border around this very old country. I was ambassador to North Korea as well. So I will do exhibition, and these are all, with the exception of about 4 or 5 Chinese artists, doing art about Korea. These are all North Koreans or South Koreans, for instance. So I also have another collection, but my passion is with the Chinese collection.
Thank you. That would be
So
all.
I don't know if this was very useful for
Uli, my last
for what
question.
you were asking me.
My last question.
Or what I thought.
Yeah, my last question about the conception of CCA, Chinese Contemporary Art.
Mm-hmm.
This conception of Chinese contemporary art exists. Somebody think this is like a fictional conception, and people talking about the YBA. Everybody knows it's a young British artist, but CCA, we understand that it's from your prize, CCAA, and then we understand what is the conception of contemporary art. But in the mainstream of global art community, is it a real conception? It makes sense to everybody to understand what is the meaning of CCA in the global scenes.
Yeah. That's a good question, because there are some doubts about this, because there are doubts about, is there Chinese art, or is there this or that. I personally am very convinced, there is American art, there is even Swiss art, there is Chinese art. Why am I so convinced? Let's just take one of these global artists. I sometimes use this example, like Richard Prince. We all know, these photos, the cowboy, riding, and the blue sky. You know what I'm talking about, these photos.
Yes.
These artists cost millions, these photos. But this can only come from the US. No Chinese would ever think this. No Swiss would ever think this. The cowboy riding with that particular sunset, and all the million detail, very small details in there. So that's what I mean. You know, we call it global, but if you are a contemporary artist, you want to be successful, and you want to be successful in what I call the global mainstream, you have to do this by difference. You know, I cannot do the same thing like, I don't know, like Jeff Koons, or, you know, I have to think of a difference. And this difference normally, or for me, the easiest, you know, come from my own roots, where I stand, where I stand. If I'm a Chinese, you know, then I have very specific thing I stand on. So that doesn't mean that, you know, in the end we have to have Chinese symbols there. But, you know, it may be the attitude towards art, or it may be, you know, like, I don't know, the Shang Shui tradition, you paint from your imagination rather a landscape. You don't go there and represent the real thing, or, you know, there's a lots of things you find in your own tradition, and that can create this difference. Otherwise, you're just one of everyone. So that's why I see, you know, there is a justification, and every day when I look at art, I'm confirmed in this. You know, I see, well, you know, this artist, of course, must live in a big Western city, or this artist, you know, must live in a kind of underdeveloped African environment. Otherwise, the art would look different. So yes, you know, there is this, even though that's not the trend, you know, people think it's all the same or no difference, but it really makes a difference. And, you know, these differences make the art interesting in the end. So yes, there is a reason why I call it still Chinese contemporary art. But, you know, now the Museum M Plus took it over. So the first thing they did, they call it the SIG Prize. If I want to have the name SIG Prize, I had 20 years to call it the SIG Prize. You know, I felt it's a much better brand to call it the Chinese Contemporary Art Award. It's actually a great brand, but they think my name is also a great brand. So, you know, they choose my name instead. But the idea is, of course, they must expand it to, you know, their territory, their focus. So we expanded to what's called Greater China. What's Greater China? You know, it's Dalu, it's Taiwan, Hong Kong,
yeah,
maybe Singapore. So, you know, it's the Chinese culture. And I think it makes sense, you know, to talk about Chinese cultural space, because that's very distinct, say, from the Southeast Asian cultural space, you know.
Yeah.
So there are real differences, but they are not exactly the border, but it's a cultural space. So, you know, now it's the Greater China cultural space. So that's the definition.
Okay, thank you.
But I have talked so much. I mean, I should ask these two ladies to tell me more.
Yeah, this is 1.5 hours. It's so fast, and I thank you. You share very effective and influential experience and knowledge for me, for our colleague. Xie Rong, what is your?
Mr. Wooley, I have a question.
Yeah.
Would you
call me Uli, please? Call me Uli. That's much easier.
Thank you. The Silver Art Foundation.
Pardon me too.
Please repeat
can you
the question.
Give a wish to the Silver Art Foundation.
Well, actually, who asked me some time ago, like he said, can you think of a slogan or something?
Yes.
And if I have a wish, it's related to that. It's about creativity. I think this is very much the focus of the Art Server Foundation. And why I talked about that, I think this is the only thing that will save us, you know, in the world. It's the human creativity. It's the only resource, no limitation. You know, all our resources that will be used up at some point, or they destroy the planet. It's only this one resource, so important. It's the creativity. You know, that will, if anything will save us, it's that. And, you know, I'm very happy that this server foundation actually focus also on the creativity. So I hope, this will be very conducive to more creativity in people of China and beyond China. That's really my hope, yes. And I think you have something very material there you started.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Uli. Thank you for your greeting and your experience, your acknowledgement to share to everybody, to us. And we will send you the recording, the literate recording to you, the text to you after, and you can brief readings about that, and sometimes we will publish also the interviews in the text after. And
oh, you want to publish what we talked about? I wasn't
yes,
aware of that.
But we will send you the text to you, and you can revise
the English text. Okay?
Yeah, English text. Yes, English
Yeah.
text. And very, very thanks, many thanks for you, and thanks to Joy Chen, also thanks Xierong for this attending this interview. I think this is very interesting and full of the knowledge and experience, and we are so so happy to listen to this. And thanks, Uli. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Uli. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye. Bye. Okay.
好，谢荣。